Welcome back, everyone. A disturbing development in the 2021 death of a 23-year-old pregnant woman in Massachusetts. A former police officer, Matthew Farwell, charged with killing Sandra Birchmore while still a cop. Prosecutors say Farwell groomed and sexually abused Birchmore starting when she was a minor. That he staged her death to make it look like a suicide after she told him she was pregnant with his child. Farwell has pled not guilty to the charges against him. There is so much to unpack here. Let's bring in legal analyst and trial attorney Misty Marris and our very own Caitlin Becker. Ladies, good morning. Caitlin, you and I were talking during a commercial about how dark this case is as we learn more details. How did this go from being ruled a suicide to now potentially a murder?
You know, Hannah, it really came to sort of a long investigation into this case after her friends and family, were sort of screaming from the rooftop saying this is not as it seems, and they did file a wrongful death suit. Now, the federal government has started to investigate, and these charges are federal. They came from the FBI, and what they found when they investigated was, you're taking a look at surveillance video here, that's Matthew Farwell going into the elevator at Sandra Birchmore's apartment. This is the last time anyone would see her alive. We then see him coming out a short while later. Now, we've known from the beginning that he was the last person to see her. He originally told police, according to documents, that he had gone, he had broken up with her, she was upset, it was a bad night, but she was alive when he left. Well, what they later found was, upon investigating Sandra's friends and loved ones, she had apparently told them in the days leading up to her death that he had been acting strange. He'd asked for a key to her apartment, and he'd been investigating parts of her apartment, including her closet door. She would later be found hanging from that very door jamb. And she also wasn't acting in a manner that suggested she was going to take her own life. This is according to police. She had 2 loads of laundry going, one in the washer, one in the dryer. She had a sonogram picture on the kitchenette. She had called a photographer that very day to schedule a newborn photo shoot. And these just aren't the actions of someone who would be planning on ending their life. So the police kind of added all of that together, and then the FBI arrested him in a SWAT raid. He was driving a gravel truck at a parking lot.
Misty, like I mentioned, the more details we learn, the more disturbing this gets. What are the key pieces of evidence prosecutors now have against this former police officer?
Caitlin really laid it out, but what's really important in this case is that initially it was ruled a suicide by state-level investigators and state-level prosecutors. The federal government intervened, as Caitlin said, due to that push by friends and family and a wrongful death lawsuit where there was a report by a forensic pathologist that the injuries were not consistent with suicide and deemed this a homicide. So that independent report really triggered the federal government to come in and conduct this investigation. Now, that's unusual. Typically, a murder investigation would take place at the state level. They would be state level charges that would be against Farwell. However, in this case, federal government comes in, does a further investigation, uncovers Hannah 30,000 plus text messages exchanged between the two dating back 10 years.
Wow.
So these text messages, coupled with this independent analysis regarding the death and additional evidence that's coming from friends and family who were communicating with her prior to her death, all led to these federal charges, which, keep in mind, it's not murder. It's killing of a witness or victim. Because remember, in general, the feds would not have the ability to bring murder charges. So this is a very specific charge. And it's all based on grooming in a program that she was in as a youth by this police officer, and then trying to cover that up by ultimately killing her. So this is a very complicated case. It's now a federal trial that we're going to see coming out of this. But those text messages and some of what was uncovered in that wrongful death lawsuit are going to be central to the prosecution's case.
So as we talk about this additional evidence and the tens of thousands of text messages, Misty, what kind of defense do you think Farwell's legal team will now mount?
So the defense of the legal team is going to be specific to this particular charge. So first of all, we know that he's pled not guilty. We know that he denied having a sexual relationship with her when she was a minor. And he said their sexual relationship happened when she was actually an adult and able to consent. So although he admits to having that relationship, he said that it happened in a different time frame. So that's always going to be part of this. The other issue is going to be that this was initially considered a suicide. Remember, there's going to be competing experts in the courtroom who are going to say different things about the nature of the injury that ultimately led to death. So that's what it's going to be focused on. This is going to be a heavily expert-centric case where you're going to have experts come in and review the report, the initial autopsy report, in accordance with the report that was created by a private entity for the family in connection with the wrongful death lawsuit. So it's really going to be a battle of the experts there in the courtroom, and that's going to be central to his defense.
And Caitlin, you were actually in Stoughton, Massachusetts this week. How is the community reacting, especially now that we're learning details that this woman was groomed since she was a teenager?
That's, I think, the biggest issue here, and that really also goes to motive, Henna. This is what investigators say was the motive for the killing, that there was a call that came into the Stoughton Police Department that was going to uncover this long-term sexual relationship, and it also implicates two other people or three other people, including Farwell's twin brother, his former boss. So we could also be seeing additional sexual assault or sexual crime charges there somewhere down the line. And people in the community are really upset, but they're hoping that this means there's going to be justice for Sandra.
Misty Marris, Caitlin Becker, not an easy case. Thank you for breaking it down for us, ladies. We appreciate it.